Hey guys, welcome back to Pistons Talk Podcast. Hope you guys are having a great Sunday evening. We're joined by one of my favorite reoccurring guests, Zarek Bully Ball. You might, recognize him from that account. Definitely go check them out if you haven't already. Got the links in the description below. But Zar, welcome back to the show, man.
Man, I appreciate you having me once again. Excited to talk more Pistons basketball. I literally just got done with the Motor City Cruise game, like ran in the door and hit record here. So yeah, I'm excited to go.
I want to ask you about a player on that squad because I feel like
Yeah.
Pistons fans in general get obsessed with second round picks.
Yep.
What do you got to make of Bobby Clipman, like just in the cruise right now? Like I see a lot of Pistons fans wondering why he's not getting any clock with the Pistons. Do you think it's just kind of like a red shirt year for him of just developing down there?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's definitely just a year of development. He came off the start of the year with that calf injury, which took him out for quite some time, and then since then it's just kind of been like building his momentum back up in the G League, and I think he's been playing really well. Tonight he had 25 points. Great at drawing fouls. Really talented playmaker. Um, Great shooter as well. Like he's pretty much what you want in a modern wing. I thought he's been playing great for the Crews lately, and I I think yeah, this is definitely a red shirt year for Bobby, and I think that's like a great opportunity for him to just kind of get acclimated. And then I think next year his number is probably going to get called quite a bit more than it has this year. And I think all around this has just been like kind of getting acclimated, and it's the first time I feel like the Pistons have kind of been able to redshirt someone successfully without it being like a hindrance to their rotation or a hindrance to that player's development. Like this truly is just for his development, and then to get him ready for they need him next season. Because I'm sure with all the re-signings they do, all the stuff that has to happen this summer, I'm sure he's going to be playing a significant role for them.
I feel like if he has a good training camp going into next season, he'll definitely compete um, for backup power forward minutes
Yeah,
with Simone. Because I know
yeah,
Simone has been really up and down this season, and a lot of fans are like, "Man, why don't we just give Bobby some clock?" I know he's gotten some opportunities in garbage time late, which I was really surprised that he actually has not scored a basket yet, like with the Pistons. Because I just got done watching some of that Curtis game. I didn't watch the second half. I probably should have. Like I watched the first half, and he was, crashing the boards, hitting some threes. So I know a lot of Pistons fans are really excited about him and what he could possibly do with this team.
yeah. It was a great second half. Honestly, you missed the best part because everybody kind of got going in that second half, including Bobby. I want to say he ended the first half with like about 9 points and had 16 in the second half. Dennis Jenkins also played out of his mind. I thought he's been playing great lately for the Crews. That's also a two-way player for the Pistons. Tolu Smith, Ron Harper uh, played great games. Honestly, it was a great game all around. They had a slow first half, but the second half they really started getting going. And if you do ever find yourself watching a Cruise game, they do play a lot like style wise, similarly to Detroit in terms of playing in transition and really having that good chemistry on the court and having guys like Ron Harper kind of play a little bit of that Cade role where he's the primary initiator and primary scorer, but Dennis Jenkins also has been incredible. So
One of my buddies went to a cruise game. I want to say last month when Ron Harper was going out of his mind when I think he hit like 12 threes or something like that.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and someone was just like, "Oh, we got Kate Cunningham in the cruise and like up with the real team in Detroit." Like their games, like they're kind of similar. Like if you're just kind of looking in terms of like pace and play style, it's kind of funny to see.
Yeah, it's ironic though because I in my interview I did with him after the game, he had mentioned watching Malik Beasley as someone he wants to imitate in terms of how he approaches 3-point shooting. But yeah, I think in terms of role on the Cruise, really similar to Cade, just because he has the ball in his hands a lot, and he also really likes the mid range, like how Cade does as well. So they're both fun to watch, honestly.
Yeah, honestly, I hope that the Crews do kind of push for the playoffs because I feel like they've been so close over the past like 2-3 years. But enough G League talks. I'm sure people like who some Pistons fans, they like it. Other Pistons fans, they don't. First topic of the show. It's got to be Shaquille O'Neal. It has to.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to get like just your overall thoughts. With Shaq saying that the Pistons are quote unquote boring.
Well, it's tough, right? Because like I think everybody loves Shaq, the player, and the larger than life personality that he is. But as a NBA analyst, Shaquille O'Neal leaves a lot to be desired, right? Like I feel like that's not a crazy thing to say. He's entertaining, and I always said this about the TNT show is it's extremely entertaining, and it's not so offensive, I guess, to basketball fans if you just watch it in terms of entertainment. But when it starts kind of becoming the main thing that people consume, and we're talking about it even now, like when it starts becoming this large, it feels a bit irresponsible at a point. And here, like I have no issue with Shaq having wanting to talk about basketball, but the thing is, I don't know if he really wants to as much at this point. If I think he just feels obligated to. I think Shaq just feels obligated to talk about basketball, and be this basketball figurehead and be this figurehead for the NBA. I don't know if his heart is really in it anymore. Like I really don't feel like his heart is in the NBA and watching basketball. I think Shaq just wants to be the media personality, the commercial, every other commercial you watch is Shaq in there, right? Like that's where I think he wants to be. And I don't know really how in love he is with the game at this point. Cause it feels like to me, Shaq said this without watching maybe a single even half of a Detroit Pistons basketball game this season. I don't think he's watched any Pistons basketball whatsoever. And it led to this larger discussion just about, the Pistons not really having much national spotlight this year. Like they've been talked about more than they've actually been seen, and it's interesting in that way. But part of me also thinks like Shaq did this on purpose. You know what I mean? Like I feel like if he does have his finger on the pulse more than I'm giving him credit for, I think he did this as a way of kind of jumpstarting conversations about the team. Because I think 24 to 48 hours after this comment, they got flexed to ESPN for that Miami Heat game. And I was like, okay, I don't know if that's necessarily a coincidence. Miami Heat, former Shaquille O'Neal team. I don't know. It's tough. Like part of me just wants to lay into Shaq on this and say like, obviously it's a stupid take. If you watch any of the Pistons games, a half of the Pistons game, a Pistons highlight, 15 seconds of the Detroit Pistons, you would know that they are quite literally the opposite. One of the most fun teams to watch in transition, extremely athletic, talks a lot of shit. Like this is just a really objectively fun basketball team to watch. That it's obvious that he doesn't watch the team. Like it almost doesn't even deserve like acknowledgement, because it's like, okay, clearly you haven't watched, right? And it's just, if he didn't say this to kind of spark discourse and let it be the Pistons kind of stepping stone into the national spotlight, and he genuinely meant this, leave the seat, put the microphone down. And I don't even say that disrespectfully. Like, if you don't want your spot as a figurehead for the NBA, give it to somebody else, because you're doing the league a disservice at this point, right? Like you're doing the league, you're doing the game, you're doing the players all a disservice when you come out and just say things for the sake of saying things without watching any of the games, without even interacting with like the fans, the community, like the communities of fans, the basketball world in general, when you're just completely ignoring that and in your own bubble. And oh fuck, I gotta go on a podcast today and talk about the NBA. You're doing everybody a disservice. So if that's the case, put the microphone down. You have so many other ventures that you already do those, and just stop tarnishing the game, because it's hurting the game at this point.
I felt like that first comment, I was like, okay, his host was basically saying like, they're fun to watch. And then he kind of goes and says, well, they're not 40 and 20. And he's just like, oh, so we can only talk about 5 teams, which that clip got a lot of Pistons fans saying, like, maybe he's still upset with 04, which that could be the case. We really don't know. But what made it worse, though, is they addressed it, I think, a day later on Inside the NBA with like Candace Parker and Vince Carter. And he's like, Isaiah Stewart's my favorite player. Kate Cunningham's playing well. Chauncey's got those guys playing well, which made it 10 times
I
worse.
forgot about that. Yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah.
It's just like, I like, maybe to your point, he's just trying to, get them on more national TV if you want to give him the benefit of the doubt. But at the same breath, the way I'm thinking, ESPN's probably like, we can draw narratives and talk, like, basically just dunk on Shaq for 2 hours if the Pistons do well against his former team in the Miami Heat. But when I saw that, I was just like, I think he's still a little bit upset about that 2004 finals. And I found the old clip of him and Kobe like kind of talking to each other, and he's like, "Yeah, we should have won it. Like, Ben Wallace guarded me is ridiculous. We should have won that easily."
Yeah, I saw there's a clip. I think it was Funny Marco where he was like saying that, like, he's like, did you have beef with Ben Wallace, and just didn't acknowledge it? And then Shaq kind of just plays it off and changes the subject. So maybe there is some beef with the Pistons, and he's still kind of hurt about that 04 gentleman sweep. In which case, it's funny because he always talks about rings. Like, that's one you just got to let go, because that's not one he got. So
no, it's just like just that whole week. I did want to just kind of bring it up and talk about it because I thought it was like, from an entertainment aspect, dude, I've been laughing the amount of like memes that people have sent me, or like every time I post now. Like last night, JB got ejected. I'm sure we'll talk about it later. They're like, man, Chauncey got heated. Like, people are just trolling.
Yeah.
Like, and I love Pistons fans because they have a good sense of humor. But honestly, man, I just thought it was pretty damn funny.
Yeah, no, it's I saw one the other day where it was like JB had said something, and it's like, man, Chauncey really got those boys going today, huh? And I was like, yeah, it's tough.
Even Portland's social media team, when the Pistons admin on Twitter's been like going at it. I love it. Even the Portland Trailblazers social team, like, hey, that's our coach. Like, like even they're like really, you don't know who our coach is. Like, but honestly, I think the whole NBA Twitter community has been like just posterizing and dunking on Shaq all week, and can't say I don't like it.
Yeah, the Zion take also was stupid. I mean, like, come on, he's been playing out of his mind when he's been healthy. So it was like discrediting that. That's what I mean, man. Like, it's doing the game a disservice. And if that's really like the take you want to have, and that's the way you want to approach the game, leave it behind. Just stop, because at this point it's hurting his legacy. And now kids who watch the NBA, who are on Twitter and just like basketball in general, all they're gonna know Shaq for is kind of being a hater, right? Like, that's a disservice to his legacy, and that's just a disservice to the game.
Yeah, I think that's why Amazon and NBC are definitely going to bring more of a healthy discourse in terms of just basketball talk. Like, I'm really curious to see, how Blake Griffin and Dirk kind of just break down basketball games, because I feel like they'll be more of something where we come up here and we actually could agree with like what they're seeing, and actually, been, NBA players for a long time. But I think a big reason why, Inside the NBA probably didn't get renewed with the NBA is they don't really talk about basketball. It's just Shaq and Charles Barkley just like saying, I got 4 rings for like 2 hours, basically, type of thing. Like, if you like entertainment and just like 2 old guys bickering, it's for you. But if you actually want like intelligent basketball conversations, it's really, really not for you at all.
No, and like that, I could go on my own entire hour-long conversation about this alone. But it does strike one thing I always like feel really passionate about in the way that I cover the game, is just like, the game needs more respect. Like, the NBA as a whole needs so much more respect than it's given, and it doesn't help when its major talking heads give it absolutely none. And I think, like, the All-Star game, a month ago. Perfect example. That presentation, the way they talked about it, like what other sport has people, old players and Kevin Hart making fun of current all-stars, the best of the best as they play the game. Like, what I mean? Like, who wants to see that? It's its own discussion, and I'll definitely get into that at some point. But it's just it's a disservice to the game, and I really am looking forward to seeing a more nuanced way of approaching basketball, because right now it just feels like all like clickbait headlines, shitty takes, hot takes for the sake of being hot takes, trade rumors that aren't really trade rumors. Like, I would like the game to just get treated with a little bit more respect than it has, because it's a beautiful game. It's a beautiful sport. And it pisses me off when, like, I'm a football fan too, but like seeing the way football gets talked about, it still has all those same things as any sport does, as any news topic does. But it's not given the level of disrespect that the NBA and basketball as a whole gets. It's honestly the NBA's fault for putting themselves in that position. But again,
Yeah, like that. I don't want to go. I feel like we could have a podcast of like why inside the NBA is just not for the like diehard fan. It's more for like a casual viewer. But I don't want to harp on that too much. I did want to kind of move over to this next topic, and I talked about this player last week with the guys from the Pin Down, Blake Silverwin and West Davenport. We're talking about Devin Booker, right? So Devin Booker, obviously, and the Phoenix Suns, I think we could both agree that they've had a season where probably not up to their expectations. And Bovado, who is a sports book, had their odds for Devin Booker's next team if it's not with the Phoenix Suns, if they decide to blow it up. And what would you look at that? The Detroit Pistons are the odds-on favorite at plus 800, and you got the Knicks at plus 900, OKC plus 900, and Houston Rockets at plus 950. So I want to get your take on this, because I feel like you're a very big Devin Booker fan. Like, what do you kind of make of like the Phoenix Suns this season, and could you possibly see them, trying to maybe trade their franchise guy in Devin Booker?
I think this is a situation where Phoenix, since the KD trade, since Matt Ishbia became their owner, has not met expectations whatsoever. That's a team that, had made a finals run, was really close to a championship at one point, and it looked like the world was just up for them, right? Like Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Devin Booker, Chris Paul, like great young core, DeAndre Ayton, great young core complemented by one of the greatest point guards of all time. Granted, everybody acknowledged he was getting older. Then at a certain point, it was like, okay, like it looks like they're probably going to need to upgrade, right? Off of Chris Paul and that large contract. It being Kevin Durant on paper didn't necessarily look like a bad fit at first when you had Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton on that team. But everything since that season has screamed new owner syndrome. It has been a NBA 2K rebuild in real life, right? And it has just been weird trade, weird signing, firing a coach, then hiring a new coach, then firing a coach, and now it looks like you're going to fire another coach in hopes of maybe saving the locker room chemistry. And I tried to pay attention to this because I saw the Suns game in person when they came to Detroit this season, and that bench had zero life to it whatsoever. And I had been hearing things all season about how bad that locker room is and how they kind of brought in Mike Budenholzer as like a last ditch effort to kind of save the locker room because they thought maybe Frank Vogel wasn't doing a great job. And I feel like it's pretty obvious if you just watch the body language. Like I've always been a body language enthusiast sounds really weird, but I mean, like I think it's really important to
pause.
Yeah, pause. But it's really important to watch the body language when you start hearing things about like teams' locker room chemistry or certain like things going wrong. It's always important to watch that. And the body language has not lied, right? Like they look like they don't necessarily all get along. They look like they don't necessarily believe that they are a championship level team. Um, and it shows. And I feel like the Bradley Beal situation at the deadline screamed, this is not going well at all. And we're really trying to trade Bradley Beal. And then you'd hear Bradley Beal's agent go, well, we're not budging on our no trade clause. We haven't been approached on anything. And, that ultimately went nowhere. So when you have something like that happen at the deadline, that they're really desperate to save this situation. And then it comes out that they try to trade Kevin Durant without telling Kevin Durant. This is headed for a really nasty offseason, right? I think that is not an insane thing to say. Once, and I don't think this is like an if, once Kevin Durant gets traded, where does that leave Devin Booker and the Phoenix Suns, right? Because you're stuck with Bradley Beal, who I don't think he's been offensively bad, but in no way, shape, or form is he worth, the $50 million plus the no trade clause. And that kind of really handicaps what you're able to do, because they also drained their asset pool for Kevin Durant. You're in a no-win situation, right? And at a certain point, you kind of have to make a decision of, okay, what's right for us? And I don't think the Phoenix Suns on their own would look to trade Devin Booker. But I do think Devin Booker reaching this stage in his career now, seeing other players around the league get moved without, like a Luka Doncic, right? Like get moved without ever wanting out, thinking he was going to spend his entire career there. I think loyalty is a really heavy word, and it meant a lot. But right now, I don't know if it necessarily means as much. And I know they've been doing damage control like crazy, saying Devin Booker's committed to the franchise and he's not going to leave. But at the same time, like, what do you expect him to say, right? Like, what do you expect his representatives to say? This is 101 damage control. And I really feel like there's going to be a point where they don't make the playoff run that they expect to make, right? Like if they even make it. And Kevin Durant gets traded, because I don't think that's an if. I think Devin Booker goes, well, okay, well, what's next for me? And I think he definitely looks at a Detroit Pistons and sees the situation of, this is a team that he wanted to get drafted by. Like, this is no secret. He desperately wanted to be drafted by the Detroit Pistons. He is a very proud Michigander. He reps Detroit in everything that he does. And it also just so happens that the season where he might start looking elsewhere, his hometown team seems like they're ready to make that next step. It seems like they're a serious basketball team. And it also seems like they're a team that could really benefit from having a second superstar. All I'm saying is, if the time comes this summer where Devin Booker is going to start exploring his options, I would not be surprised if the Pistons not only are on that list, but also anticipate being on that list.
Yeah, it's very intriguing to me the way his career has kind of unfolded in Phoenix. Obviously, not winning a whole lot until Chris Paul and Monty Williams got there. They make the finals. They decide to move on from Monty. I can't even remember who their coach was. I want to say Frank Vogel, it might have been.
Yep.
Frank Vogel, which I still think Frank Vogel's a good coach. I didn't really think he could really do anything. And to your point, I think you talked about it last time you were on, with the body language with the Phoenix Suns when they were here in Detroit. Like, that was a bench that no one was really up and clapping. No one was really up and celebrating one another or cheering for each other. It was a bench that looked very toxic. They were obviously still doing their job and playing basketball, but I don't think there's a lot of people in that locker room that like each other. And it's kind of funny, like, Kevin Durant and Devin Booker are very close. Like, any type of shoot around, they're always together. And Bradley Beal kind of seems like the odd man out, just from like my vantage point and my point of view. But that KD trade, and then I think the Bradley Beal trade, in my opinion, was kind of over the top. I didn't really feel like they needed a Bradley Beal because I thought they had an okay bench. They just needed to add some more pieces in a point guard, but I think they kind of went overkill. And to your point, I think Matt Ishbia does have that new owner syndrome where he thinks that he needs to spend the most to win a championship. And we've seen, franchises that have tried to, build these super teams, they're usually left with nothing. Like the Cleveland Cavaliers are a perfect example when LeBron was there. Look how long it took them to rebuild and just gain assets and be competitive to where they're at now. It took them several years to get to that point. But I think you make a very good point as well in terms of obviously Devin Booker is going to be looking at the landscape. He's going to looking at his, his peers, top shooting guards in the league. And he may look at it and say, like, these are my 4 teams that I'm interested in going to. Trade me to one of these teams. And I think the Pistons would be on his list. So we see it every time he comes to, LCA. He's got Lions gear on, Red Wings gear. Like, obviously, grew up in Grand Rapids, likes being here, likes supporting his hometown teams. And I think that's why a lot of Pistons fans gravitate towards him as a player. But the whole Phoenix situation is just really messy. And I agree with you. I think it's just going to be just fireworks this summer. Like, it's going to be so toxic. Like, I kind of feel bad for Shams Charania because I know that's all he's going to probably be tweeting about this summer is just the Suns this, the Suns that, the Suns this. But I know there's a lot of fans that are kind of on the fence. They're 50-50 if they do want a Devin Booker. I think my only question would be is like, what would it cost to get him? Because I'm sure it's not cheap. There was a report that they wanted 4 first-round picks, which I think they could get, but it just really depends like what team is like really in that conversation,
I think it also gets to a point where the Suns will have to prioritize kind of, do we want to best optimize what we want in the trade, or do we want to do right by the guy who stayed through pretty much everything, right? I think the best optimizing of all the asset pool in terms of first round picks would be like a Houston, right? But if it's doing right by your superstar whom you've had for a decade plus, and someone who's stuck through some shit that most people wouldn't have stuck through, then I think it's sending him to Detroit. If that is truly like what he wants the most, I think that would be probably the best move. Now, what does that mean for Detroit in that scenario? That's a bridge I guess you kind of have to cross. But if and when they do make the playoffs, that first round pick pool does kind of open up, and they're open to trade first round picks now. That means they can do straight up sending a 2026 or 2027 unprotected, 2029 unprotected, 2026 swap, 2028 swap, if that was the goal. But again, it's a bridge they'll have to cross, and we'll see if Booker even goes for 4 first round picks, because I feel like the landscape of trades is kind of changing, because you're looking at a guy like Luka Doncic get traded for literally 1, although objectively probably the worst trade in NBA history. It still might set a precedent in terms of, what players really go for because of the new CBA. First round picks are more valuable than they've ever been. And having a first round pick means having a cheaper contract while also having a higher level role player on your team. So I feel like, I don't think he'll go for 4, but I do think he'll still be expensive in terms of assets.
I do too. I think you always go into these negotiations asking for a lot. Like I remember Danny Ainge this offseason before Lauri Markkanen signed that extension. I think he was asking for like 5 or 6 first round picks and your firstborn grandchild, like something just like crazy.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the
spirit of your oldest ancestor as well.
Literally. I do think though, like for Pistons fans that are watching, like if you kind of look at the landscapes of their contracts, they have a lot of rookie deals, and the guys that they have signed, like Cade and Stu, are the only like real long-term deals. Like you have Simone on a 2-year deal, you have Tobias on a 2-year deal. I think they're setting themselves up to make that big move. I just don't know what that big move is going to be. I think a lot of Pistons fans are very vocal of getting a secondary score next to Cade, kind of like a Batman to his Robin, basically.
Yep.
So like I wouldn't rule out a guy like a Devin Booker at all, because I think there's a lot of ties there, especially within the organization. I know there's a lot of people in the Pistons organization that are very big fans of Devin Booker. And I'm sure Booker would love to be back home, but I don't know if it's going to be for him. It might be for a player that we're not even talking about. Like, it could be for Zion. You never know.
Right. Yeah, who I think would be a great fit, at least on court with this team. Like the half court offense, the transition offense with Cade and a Zion 2-man duo would be ridiculous. But that, again, like it's going to be a decision they kind of have to make this summer. Is like, are we where we want to be roster wise, or do we want to swing for the fences for that second star? I think that's a bridge they'll have to cross, and I think their playoff performance is really going to be determining kind of what direction they go in.
Yeah, it's like I'm waiting for that big move. I know it's very close, just the way, if you look at the contracts and you kind of look at like where this team is at, obviously they're still like very young in terms of like the whole process of this rebuild. And I think they've overachieved a lot this season. And I mean, even Trajan himself said, like, we're way ahead of schedule. We did not expect to be this far ahead, but we're not complaining, which I think the evaluation process this summer with him, I don't envy him at all, because like your next big move could make or break this roster, and like just like over the next 5 to 6 years of like where this team could possibly be in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do have I was watching Pat McAfee this week, and obviously, with the playoff seeding, a lot of Pistons fans are, looking at the Knicks, they're looking at the Pacers, the Bucks. Tyrese Halliburton was with Pat McAfee, and he said that the Pistons wouldn't be rivals to him unless they matched up in the first round. Do you agree with that from Tyrese Halliburton, and who would you like to see in the first round as a Piston fan?
I think the rivalry, I do think there's some weight to that. I mean, you can go at it as much as you want in the regular season, but I think rivalries really get cemented in the playoffs, and that's really what sets things for years to come. So I can't say I disagree. Do I think there is the beginnings of what could be a rivalry between the two? Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, that's to say though, like they actually get matched up, because one of these teams could advance and the other doesn't, and that other team could be Indiana. So then that's another discussion. But I don't know if Indiana's necessarily the matchup Pistons fans want the most. Ironically, though, with the playoffs, because if you're looking at how they've played this season, the Knicks are the dream matchup for the Pistons. I think you are praying that either you stay at 6 and the Knicks stay at 3, or the Knicks fall to 4 and you move up to 5, because the Pistons have seemingly dominated the Knicks in their two matchups they had in MSG, where that's a tough arena to play in, and the Pistons went in and thoroughly beat the Knicks. And I thought the way Cade is able to dissect a OG Anunoby, a Mikal Bridges, like two guys who are hauled as the best wing defenders in the NBA, like that's something that you really can take advantage of, because if that means Mikal and OG are on Cade, that means Brunson's on like a Malik Beasley or a Tim Hardaway Jr., and you'll take your chances there, right? I think you match up pretty perfectly. The only thing in that series that could be really concerning for the Pistons is the Karl-Anthony Towns matchup against Jalen Duren. But then again, you have Isaiah Stewart coming in, who played great defense on Karl-Anthony Towns. So I feel like that's the perfect matchup for the Pistons. Now, in terms of an entertainment standpoint and a general NBA fan standpoint, I think the Pacers would be the perfect one, just because there's already some real hatred there. They clearly don't like each other, and there's also a lot of history behind the rivalry as well that kind of gets renewed. I would love to see the Pistons and Pacers go like 7 games in a series, and see the home crowds really get into it, and just the animosity there would be really great. But the Pacers did beat the Pistons in the season series so far. Not to say the Pistons can't do it in the playoffs. Obviously, things change, but I think in terms of the matchup you want the most, I think I'd go with the Knicks.
I've kind of had the same opinions as you. I think if you're just talking strictly matchups, I think the Pistons match up pretty well with the New York Knicks. And it kind of seems like, I don't know if you've been paying attention to it, but like over the past couple of days and weeks, like there's been like a lot of like Knicks soundbite, like Mikal Bridges telling Tom Thibodeau, like, you have a bench, use it. And then Josh Hart and him getting in a fight last night on the bench. Josh Hart didn't score at all. The Knicks might be getting a little bit fatigued after a long season. And if you follow Tom Thibodeau's career, he likes to play his starters high minutes. And I think that does benefit the Pistons because there's no way the Knicks are going to be 100% come playoff time. They're going to be banged up. And I don't think any player really is 100% come playoff time, obviously.
No. Yeah.
No. I think the Knicks...
go ahead.
No, you can go ahead.
I think Brunson also, his health is going to be a major factor in also in not only the seeding, but also how things play out this playoffs. And if the Pistons do get that matchup where Brunson's not ready by the beginning of that series, that's an opportunity to go, up 2-0 before he's back. So it's something to watch. And yeah, I do think the way that they get played is not necessarily a recipe for success in the playoffs, just because you got to be healthy, right? Like we all hate the load management stuff and not being able to watch stars on any given night, but like there's no recipe for success when you're playing your guys 36, 40 minutes a night against, like a regular season game, and they're playing back to backs. Like you're going to be extremely banged up, and this is the most fast paced NBA there's ever been. So it's not just like playing, because I know older players will say it a lot, where it's like, oh, I used to play back to backs and it was no problem. Like it's a different game, and it's not only extremely physical, but it's extremely fast paced, and you're just not built to go 3 more months after that type of style. So I really feel like that's something the Pistons could take advantage of, as they've also been pretty healthy this season. I mean, outside of the Ivy injury, like there's really not been many nagging injuries for the Pistons outside of like genuinely just a freak accident.
Yeah, which I think was intentional by Trajan in the front office, is targeting players that actually play and that are like maybe on like their last leg. No pun intended, Joe Harris, but it's just kind of like what we were kind of used to during the Troy Weaver regime. But getting back to the Pacers, I think the Pacers are probably the Pistons' worst matchup because they don't have a solution for, I think, 2 players. It's TJ McConnell, who he just sees red when he plays the Pistons. He's just so hard to stop. And Pascal Siakam. I don't think Tobias Harris, I think defensively has been really good this season in spurts, but I don't think they have a solution for a Pascal Siakam. Miles Turner also has torched them. And we all know like stretch 5, perimeter 5s have been giving the Pistons like a whole lot of difficulties just guarding them in on the perimeter. But like if I'm a Piston fan, obviously the rivalry, Malice at the Palace, you'd like to maybe rekindle that rivalry. But I think matchup, I think the Pacers would give the Pistons a lot of fits.
Yeah, I think so as well. And I think I don't know if I have the Pacers as the least favorable matchup for the Pistons, just because I think Milwaukee is the nightmare for Detroit. Not because I think Milwaukee has been this unstoppable team this season, but just in terms of a matchup, like they are a matchup nightmare for the Pistons. I think Isaiah Stewart is probably, in my opinion, the best Giannis defender in the league. That being said, there is still a Damian Lillard, you have to take account for. And then, when Giannis got kind of shut down, it turns into Pat Connaughton all of a sudden's having a crazy night, or, Taurean Prince is lighting you up from 3. And like, obviously these are guys that aren't necessarily even close to being stars or anything, but it's something about when they play the Pistons, they just turn it up. I mean, like Brook Lopez. I don't think I've ever seen an average Brook Lopez game in Milwaukee against Detroit. Like I don't think I've ever seen a game where, because I know Bucks fans will complain about him a lot. I'll tell you what, they find their love for that man anytime he suits up against Detroit, because whatever issues he may have as he ages and he gets slower and, you know, all these other things, he's hitting every three he puts up. He's blocking every shot that gets put in his face. He's like playing the most perfect basketball he could ever play when he plays against Detroit. And that 2019 series still gives me personally nightmares, just because that was like the peak of my fandom. And I remember being so excited for Blake, and just Milwaukee just destroyed Detroit. And I would hate for them to kind of have that matchup again in LCA, just because I'm like, it feels like a retread, and I need the Pistons to play literally anybody else.
Yeah, Milwaukee would give me PTSD because it would make me think of like playoff Thon Maker, which was never a thing in Detroit. But yeah, that Milwaukee series was just like dreadful as a fan, even though like I think the fan base was just so happy that we were in the playoffs. Like I remember just like seeing it live on TV, how loud they were for game 3. And by game 4, they're like, yeah, it's over. I don't want that either. You know, for this core, I don't want them to, you know, possibly slip out of that 6 and have to face like a Boston, because I think that would be even worse if you have to play a Boston, because as of late I feel like they're kind of slipping and the Hawks are kind of getting in the groove, even Orlando to an extent is playing better basketball. I hope they can kind of keep that 6 seed, but yeah, I think the Bucks, I think we could both agree, would be really bad, and I think the Pacers would be too. And just like some of the perimeter defenders that like the Pacers have, like Andrew Nebhart. I think Andrew Nebhart, in my opinion, probably does the best job of guarding Cade Cunningham. Like him
Absolutely.
and Andrew Jackson from Milwaukee as well. Even though like he's not a household name, he does a really good job of staying in front of Cade and bothering him, and that like he doesn't let Cade get comfortable and get to his spots. But yeah, man, that like I really don't want to see either of those teams, because I'm just like, man, could be tough, could be rough.
Yeah.
So we're kind of sticking with playoffs. I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, Club 520 or 520 Club. I think it's Club 520 with Jeff Teague.
Yeah, Jeff Teague. Yep.
Yeah. So Jeff Teague was talking about the Pistons and Cade, and he feels like they could upset the Pacers. He feels like they could upset. I think he said the Pacers, the Bucks, and I can't remember the last team. I think he said the Knicks more, that he could upset them, because he kind of drew the parallel of Derrick Rose kind of having a coming out party in the playoffs against the Celtics. He thinks Cade Cunningham could have that same effect, because the Pistons don't have anything to lose. They're just kind of happy to be there. Do you kind of agree with, you know, Jeff Teague's assessment of, you know, the Pistons being that, you know, underdog playoff team, doesn't have anything to lose, and they could kind of play spoiler for some teams that expect to go deep in the playoffs?
Absolutely. I think I said that exact. I said the Pistons are a team that I think could steal a playoff series. I think I said that back in December, right? And that was before they really went on this crazy run in the beginning of 2025. Like, I just think they don't know how to quit, like, at all. Like they are a team that will play you tooth and nail for the full 48. And that's something that, like, it sounds cliche and it sounds like something that, like, you know, every team says about, you know, or every team wants, but it doesn't happen for a lot of teams. Like, a lot of teams don't really have the drive, no pun intended, that the Pistons do. And I just feel like they also have some guys that I feel like are real playoff risers, or have the potential to be. And Cade Cunningham is one of them. I've said this since before he was in the NBA. Once he's in that playoff atmosphere, he's really going to shine. I feel like he's built for that. I feel like he is literally like he's an all-star, right? And I think most NBA fans think positively of Cade Cunningham, but I think he really reaches that next level of superstardom when he plays playoff basketball. Like, you think of Anthony Edwards in 2000 and I think 21, 22. It might have been 22. Yeah, 22. Where he really just became like a star overnight, because obviously everyone saw the dunks and everyone knew of him, but he really became a star once he hit the playoff scene. And I feel like that's waiting for Cade Cunningham. Like he has a vintage moment kind of loading, and I feel like all he needs is the stage. I think Isaiah Stewart also is a huge playoff riser. I can see him being one, just because of the defense he plays, and also just the way he is. He's going to become he kind of already is becoming one, but he's going to be a household name by the end of the playoffs. Like, no doubt in my mind. I think Jalen Duren played pretty well in the in-season tournament game. I know it didn't go that well, but I thought he played pretty well, and I think Ausar. Although he's had a bit of a quiet stretch lately, I think he's someone that I could see playing really great defense in a playoff atmosphere. I like the young core, honestly. Like, I truly believe in their ability, and I believe in their ability to shine in important situations. Like, I feel like they've gone through so much adversity that at this point, like, they are chomping at the bit to just prove someone wrong. Like, they just, and excuse my French, they kind of just want to shut everybody the fuck up, right? Like, that's kind of the feeling I get. Like, they have this chip on their shoulder that they are not the Pistons of last year. They're not the Pistons that everybody, makes fun of. Like, they are a young team that wants their respect, and you can see them getting frustrated with the lack of respect that they've gotten. And I feel like this is a young core that's really ready to shine in the playoffs. And like he said, like, they have nothing to lose. Like, they are literally just here to make the opposing team's life hell. And I know the team that they're going to play is going to be probably higher seeded than them, unless they somehow get to the 4th seed. They want to show that you're not better than us, right? Like, you might have a higher seed, but you're not better than us. And everybody who thinks that you are, like, fuck you. Like, we're going to do our own thing.
Yeah, I think, like, if you look at the top seeds in the East, a lot of people just like, yeah, Pistons might be a fun playing team this year, and they kind of shattered those expectations because they've been in the 6th seed for quite a long time, and have played some pretty competitive basketball, have stepped up their defensive rating. I think they still have like the number 1 defensive rating since like the new year, which is crazy, kind of given like the Wizards game and everything like that. But I look at Cade, and I know some people think that he might just kind of get trapped and doubled in the half court, but you look at a lot of this young core, like Jalen Duren, like Isaiah Stewart. Like, I think Ron Holland, to me, is a big X factor come the playoffs, because I think JB is going to shorten his rotation a little bit. I think guys like Simone might actually kind of like see his role diminish a little bit. And I would expect Ron Holland to, be kind of like that energy boost off the bench to, help the team, push the pace, run, because this is a team that really likes to run in transition and create opportunities that way offensively. But like, I'm really hoping we get the Knicks. I'm really hoping we get them, because I feel like we match up so well with them.
I was going to say Ron Holland is a great one that I wanted to mention a little bit more. It's just like, I feel like he's had a season where he's had moments, right? Like, he doesn't really have a huge role on the team. He comes in, he plays his role pretty well. He's that gritty defensive guy. He'll get his buckets in transition where he can. He'll stick up for his teammates. He really just feels like they're rookie, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like he's another player that I can see kind of having a moment in the playoffs if he gets the opportunity, just because you've seen so much growth in such a short amount of time that I feel like his confidence would not be wavered by a playoff atmosphere at this point. Because if you think back to that Milwaukee game, not the in-season tournament one, but before that, where, the game came down to his free throws, right? And you could see he was visibly shaken, missed both free throws, and was clearly beating himself up over it. Ever since then, it feels like Ron Holland has evolved, and it feels like he has taken every single step that he has needed to take in order to become a better basketball player every game, every day. And I feel like he's someone who, especially lately, like the minutes you see from him, I feel like have been really impressing me. His finishing, his touch around the rim has been incredible. The way he gets his own bucket, regardless of who's in front of him, was really impressive. I think even the last game they played where he had to guard who was it? Who did they just play? I'm completely blanking.
OKC.
Okay, yes. He moved Shea like completely, right? Like I remember on a layup third or fourth quarter, I want to say, just completely moved Shea. I just feel like he's ready for that type of moment, and he's got a big personality too on the court. Like these are just guys that I really feel like are going to shine in that environment.
Yeah, like his fit. I know we're kind of talking about this like playoff upsets and matchups, but like I've been so impressed with him in the way he can finish around the basket. Like some of the just acrobatic finishes he has, I was like, there's no way that's going in, and it goes in, and I don't
Yep.
understand it. Like he's like a tier one athlete in my opinion, and I think for him, I don't even think he's scratching the surface because I think there's a lot there that the Pistons haven't even like worked with him development wise, where he can really be a guy that in the future you could have a tandem of Ausar Thompson and Ron Allen next to Cade Cunningham, which
Yep.
I think is really exciting for Pistons fans in the future. But he's definitely probably going to be my biggest X factor in the playoffs. I think Dennis Schroeder as well, just having that veteran presence. He had a double-double. I think he had like 18 and 11 assists after, Cade went out. But like having that veteran backup point guard that can really calm the storm for this team, because at times it seems like they kind of get out of control. If they have a lead, they kind of play with their food a little bit and don't take it seriously and just don't finish their opponents off, which I think having a guy like that, like all the vets on this team, for that matter, they're really going to be on these young guys' ass because they've never experienced playoff basketball. They don't know, like one possession can literally decide an outcome of a playoff game. It's not like a regular season game where like maybe you get a steal or, some transition opportunities. Like one possession can really have like a 8-9 point swing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I did want to talk to you about Jaden Ivey. Obviously, he got reevaluated. Obviously, no walking boot. I think I read stationary shooting. I don't know if he's doing any kind of like hard physical activity, but like, what do you kind of make of his rehab process? And could we maybe see him for a playoff series, you think?
I was a little more confident that he was going to play like a month ago than I am now, just because in terms of the reevaluation, like they said, he'll be reevaluated in 4 weeks, and 4 weeks from now we're going to be pretty close to the playoffs, right? If not like in the playoffs, I can't remember exactly. I don't know if that's a situation that you really want to throw a guy who's coming off of what was it, a fractured fibula. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's like a situation where you just throw him into the fire, like, because it's going to be an intense playoff series, and it's going to be like also an atmosphere that he has never played in, that I feel like I don't know if it's really setting him up for success nor the team up for success if you just kind of throw him into the fire with limited time to really get back. Like it's like, okay, you're cleared, now go guard Tyrese Halliburton. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you're cleared. All right, you got Damian Lillard tomorrow. Like, I don't know if that's necessarily the best recipe for success, not only in terms of, like his health, but just in terms of like his confidence. Like that'd be tough, right? Like that'd be tough to do for anybody, let alone someone who hasn't gotten to play in the playoffs yet. So I think, maybe if they somehow make their way to the second round and do upset a team, I think it's possible then, because he would have had more on-ball reps and full on scrimmages, that I think they'd be a little more confident that, he'd be closer to his normal self by the second round. But I don't know if I would say I don't think Jaden Ivey would play by the first round of the playoffs.
I've kind of had the same thoughts and opinions probably over the past couple of months of like, if he does come back, I think the Pistons would have to win a playoff series, and then it would be like a second round matchup, end of April, early May.
Yeah.
My only thing is like, if he does come back and he's not like 100% healthy, like if they get like 75% Jaden Ivey and like he injures himself again, like that's not something I think JB or Trajan really want to see.
Yeah.
Obviously they miss him. Second leading scorer. He was playing some of the best ball of his career, and I think the three ball was real. I don't think it was just a thing where he just got hot all of a sudden. He was starting to look like possibly a secondary option next to Cade Cunningham, but it's kind of telling that the organization is like, well, maybe he can come back. Like they haven't shut him down. They didn't apply for the disabled veteran money that they get if a player gets injured. I think they're still hopeful that he could possibly return, which kind of concerns me as a fan because like if he's not 100% and you throw him out there 65, 75%, to your point, I agree. Like the confidence thing could really shake him because he's never played in the playoffs before. There's going to be players that are going to be very physical with him, trying to get the ball out of his hands if he is on the court with Cade and company. For me, I'd love to see him out there as a fan, but at the end of the day, I'd much rather him just take a whole off season, rehab, get the strength back in that leg, and just come back stronger and better for next season.
Agreed. Yeah, I think unless you're like 100% certain that Jaden Ivey will be the Jaden Ivey that you saw prior to the injury, I don't think you really risk it. Like unless you know that, okay, he's fully healthy and he's fully feeling like himself, then okay, sure, throw him out there. But if not, and if there's even a slight bit of doubt that like, I don't know if Ivey's necessarily feeling like himself, I wouldn't put him in that type of situation just because I know he would want to be, but I just feel like it'd be doing him a disservice to really have that national spotlight for the first time. And I don't know if every fan watching knows like all the adversity that he's come through to even get to that point where he is playing on the playoff series after a broken fibula. They're just going to see, not the full product. And that's going to lead to a lot of like ridicule and, like that's its own thing as well. Like, I don't know if that's necessarily the best option for him. Now, again, if he's fully healthy, if he's feeling like himself, put him out there, right? Like I think there was not a game I can think of that they missed Jaden Ivey more than they did yesterday. I think Cade was having a really slow night before the ejection, and I think they were really, really desperately missing any sort of half-court creation outside of Cade, and especially the first half and the second as well, outside of that fourth quarter. They really miss him, but I don't think they can risk really putting him out there if they're not sure.
Yeah, I think they have to be extremely careful. Someone in the comments section said it's like Aiden Hutchinson all over again, which, I tend to agree with. Like when he got injured, a lot of Lions fans were like, yeah, if we make the Super Bowl, he could possibly be back for the Super Bowl. But I just want him to fully recover. Don't rush yourself back. Don't feel like you have to come back for the sake of the playoffs, because we've seen it in, not just, covering the Detroit Pistons, but we've seen it with other teams in the NBA where a player gets hurt, they try to rush themselves back and they like injure themselves even worse than they did initially. And you don't want that.
I mean,
a guy.
You can't think of a better example than, we were talking about the Bucks, like the PTSD of that series, like the scenes of a Milwaukee Bucks playoff series where an injured Jaden Ivey rushes himself back, also wearing the number 23 that Blake Griffin wore, like that is not lost on me, right? Like I just don't think that's something that you want to see, because you think about Blake and they said it couldn't get worse, and he was never the same after that series. And obviously Jaden Ivey's much younger, different circumstances, but again, like you said, like there's been instances where guys have rushed back and it doesn't work out.
No, like you don't want him having an even more severe injury if he does come back, but it's good to see him out of the walking boot and being on the bench and just helping out his teammates. But I do agree, like Cade definitely could have used Jaden Ivey. I did want to kind of stick with OKC. It's more of an Ausar question, and we had someone in I believe the live chat actually drop it with Ausar, and it says, "Is it me or has Ausar not looked the same since we played Boston a couple weeks ago?" I have a theory, and maybe you can tell me if I'm right. So as of late, JB has decided to switch offense for defense with Tim Hardaway Jr. For offense versus having a defensive player like Ausar out there for defense. Do you think that's more of just a game plan and a scheme with JB for the reason why Ausar has not been able to, guard, these best offensive players like James Harden comes to mind, and even at SGA, where SGA scored 4 straight possessions against THJ?
Yeah, that's something I've kind of been racking my mind over, just because I thought last night, like in those possessions where Tim Hardaway was switched on to Shea, like I was like, man, I thought Ausar Thompson was doing a great job defending him, right? Like obviously the guy had 48 points, and there's only so much you can do. Like it kind of reminded me in terms of like a coming out party, like uh the type of game that Shea had yesterday reminded me of the one that Anthony Davis had at the Palace a while ago. Like for the for the OG Pistons fans out there, like you know that game, right? I feel like it's a thing where Ausar maybe is just not, his confidence isn't where it was, and maybe there's also a noticing of that by the coaching staff, so they're not certain if they want to put him in a role on offense in clutch scenarios and in intense games like this, where he'll have the ball in his hands if he'll make the right decision, or like if his confidence is really there yet. That's what I'm assuming. I haven't been able to ask JB about this, but I it is something that I've definitely noticed, and I have to wonder like if it's really just a confidence thing, because strategically, I mean, like, yes, Ausar Thompson is not a shooter, right? Like we all know this, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have any sort of offensive game. Like we saw when he put the ball in his hands during that stretch after the Philadelphia game on ESPN. Ausar Thompson was playing some of his best basketball, right? Like I think he plays his best basketball when he has the ball in his hands, and when he's able to be that secondary creator, and he makes plays for others, not and himself. I think that's really optimizing Ausar to his fullest. And I think Koo had mentioned this as well. Like I think Duren also has had a drop in on ball reps lately. And I think that's also part of why in the last 6 games they're 2-4. Like when they have others creating as well, because they do have other players besides Jaden Ivey that can create with an Ausar and with a Duren. Duren slightly less. Duren's mostly like in the post making plays for others, but still like he can bring the ball up. I just feel like when you have that happening, that's when the Pistons are at their best, right? Like when Ausar was playing like that, the Pistons look almost unstoppable. Like that's when they had their most blowouts in a row. Like they looked like a complete basketball team. So I feel like getting back to that's going to be really important for them, and working with Ausar, if it is a confidence thing, to get his confidence back to where it should be, would be really important. Just because, yeah, I would agree. Like he has not looked like the same player since that Boston game.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it, because it's like if you want to substitute offense for defense, I get it. But like, no disrespect to THJ, happy birthday by the way. No disrespect to Malik Beasley, but like those guys aren't known to be perimeter defenders. They're good offensive weapons. Like you want your best perimeter defender out there. And obviously SGA is SGA. I do feel like he did get off with a lot of push-offs yesterday, which he does kind of push off a lot. But like, you want Ausar out there, you want Ron out there, guarding those best, just MVP caliber talents, right? But like, I don't get why they've kind of gone away from letting Ausar initiate the offense, just bringing the ball up the court and just setting up the offense. Same with JD. Obviously, as of late, they've just really given the ball to Cade and Dennis Schroeder to set up the offense. But I think that dynamic of having Ausar and Jalen Duren bring up the ball up the court, I think it was a lot of mismatch nightmares for the opposing teams, because they didn't really know what defender to throw at those players. And now I think they're a little bit more predictable. They're playing a lot of in half court sets, especially last night with the starters. I felt like the starters were basically forced to play out of the half court, where the bench unit with Isaiah Stewart and Ron and Malik, they were more pushing the pace, playing in transition. And I feel like a big reason why the Pistons had a small lead in the second quarter was because of Isaiah Stewart and Ron Holland, because they were pushing the pace and they were unpredictable. Where I think right now the Pistons are very predictable to guard in the half court. They know all they have to do is really like throw a good defender at Cade, or possibly double him, and most likely it's going to be a very tough jump shot or possibly a turnover. Um, Hopefully they go back to how they were using Ausar and JD, because I feel like, to your point, that's why they were having a lot of those blowouts.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I just, in general, basketball flows better when guys are creating for others, right? And I think maybe implementing Dennis has been a little bit difficult for them because they know he can create for others, and it seems like they really look to him to do it. But I just feel like it's a waste of Ausar Thompson's talents when, he's kind of sitting in a corner, or like, he's not really involved as much on offense, just because, like, again, we all acknowledge he is not necessarily the world's best shooter, nor near it right now. But I feel like there's so much he can do in terms of creation and finishing around the rim, and just creating for others as well. Like, I just feel like we saw it, right? Like, we've seen it. We've seen what this offense can look like. As they have no Ivy, but it felt like Ausar started playing that Ivy adjacent role really well, and it's interesting, and I feel like maybe that's an adjustment that they'll start making this week. And if I'm able to, I'll be working the game on Sunday against New Orleans. If this is still a problem, I'll try to get something out of JB in terms of asking it, but like, I feel like it's something that really worked for the Pistons, and it didn't seem like teams really had much of an answer for it. So turning Cade back into the really heliocentric, ball dominant, like, hey Cade, this is your possession, buddy, like, you got it, type of player, like, it doesn't do much for Cade either, right? Because that's a lot of pressure on him, and then he's getting blitzed, and then it leads to just not necessarily creating the best looks for others. Like, obviously Cade's an all-star and he's going to get focused on by defenses, but at the same time, like, you have to plan for that, where other guys can create and Cade can get created for as well, because I thought he has had some great off-ball reps as well this season.
Yeah, I also felt like Ausar bringing the ball up the court, Cade could play way more off ball, and he wouldn't really have to exert as much energy of just bringing the ball up the court. Like, it works so well. Maybe it's because they want to incorporate Dennis Schroeder more with Cade. That could be a possibility, but I don't think they should just be so stubborn, in a sense where, like, you're just going to have Dennis Schroeder and Cade bring the ball up the court. I think having different players bring the ball up the court, having different sets, kind of confuses the other team a little bit. And I think that's why they were playing so well, out of the All-Star break and all of February.
Agreed.
So we have one more question, and we can wrap this up. This comes from Canetta. I know you were at the game yesterday. He said, we just sold out last game. What do you think the playoffs will be like?
Well, I wasn't yesterday. I was just watching from home, but I was there the Denver game. I think that was my last game I did, where I got to do photography. I got also randomly stuck in an elevator with Dr. J, which was insane. But I think this is probably, like, I have no bias in saying this. I really feel like you're sitting on potentially the best environment in the NBA this playoffs. I feel like not only is this a city that is already extremely passionate, extremely loud about their sports teams, but I mean, historically, the Pistons have had some of the best crowds when it comes to playoffs, championship runs. Like, they are notorious for it. And once that starts getting going, and unlike that 2019 season where they kind of limped to the playoffs, which hurts my heart to say, because I at this point in my experience covering the Pistons, I'd say, like, it's more just objective than anything. But it's at a point where, like, that 2019 season, though, that meant something to me, right? And I was delusional enough to think that they were going to use it to turn it into, like, coming back to the playoffs the next year. But I feel like everybody else was maybe a little more grounded in reality, because I attended those games, and I think everybody was there to support the team. But I think everybody also knew that there is no chance in hell, like, they are winning even a single game, nor if they're even coming back, next year. Because, like, the next year they didn't really obviously sell that much, and then there was the pandemic, and then that pretty much reset everything. But I think this is a unique scenario where everybody since I can remember has talked about the glory days of the, going to work Pistons and, the run they had from all the way up until 2008, where they just were selling out crowds like nothing. And, it was the greatest atmosphere. And growing up in Michigan and going to Pistons games since I can, really remember, I didn't get to experience that, right? Like I didn't get to experience the prime of the Pistons crowds at the Palace. Like I experienced Ben Gordon, Charlie Villanueva, Austin Day. That was my childhood, like I then I had the hopes of Brandon Jennings to cling on to before it turned into that, 2015-16 season where it was, Stanley Johnson was my guy. And that playoff series really that still means something to me, where he guarded LeBron, and then that turned into nothing. And then there was that 2019 run, and then I was like, okay, well, Blake had this amazing year, and then that turned into nothing. This is the first time where I really feel like they are not only here and they're going to have this insane atmosphere, but it really feels like the city is bought into the team. Not only in the current here and now, but in the future as well. Like it feels like this is a city that really sees this young core, sees a young superstar in Cade Cunningham, and they want to let them know, like, we got your back, right? Like I think Detroit always has this underdog mentality where they're like, Detroit versus everybody. And I think that's something that they carry with them everywhere. And it really helps when you're truly bought in, because the crowds just for like a Washington Wizards game, right? Unreal. And like that used to be probably because my parents have had tickets since I was like 15, 16 at LCA. Not all, that was always the worst crowd. Wizards versus Pistons by far. That was always the worst crowd, not even close. To now that being like damn near a sellout and a rowdy crowd, and they're losing their mind at every single thing happening, and they're all doing, even when it comes to there's like a role player doing the Fontecchio hand gesture, like everyone in the crowd doing it really just signifies how in line the city is with the team. 1 through 15, the Motor City Cruise, like they're having a decent season, right? But like I think they had a great season in 2021 where they made the playoffs, and it didn't really feel like everyone was really bought into even the cruise. But as a result of the Pistons being as good as they have been and kind of having the identity that they have, where they are this underdog, like Detroit versus everybody type of team, that the city now goes to, I've been to a few Motor City Cruise games in the last week where they're bought in. Like these are some of like the largest crowds I've seen at Motor City Cruise games in my 4 seasons of covering the team. Like it's starting to become a thing where I can see this being a lasting impact. And this is really great, honestly. And this is something I really wanted talk to players or JB about, is this is going to be what kids now talk to their kids about. You know what I mean? Like I my whole life just heard, oh, the going to work Pistons, the bad boys. And, even when JB got here, he had said, oh, like, we're going to bring it back to that type of identity, like the bad boys and the going to work thing, that I don't even think they've realized, because I've heard it from everybody in that, like the team, the players, everybody, oh, we're going back to that, right? I don't think so. I think this is its own thing. And I at a certain point, like, you are now setting the precedent for what people who come here, players who come here, fans who watch the team, this is going to be the identity that the Detroit Pistons have for years to come. And I think that's really something to be celebrated. And I think the crowd in the playoffs is absolutely going to be, no doubt, a sellout. And I also think it's going to be really setting a precedent for years to come.
I have so many thoughts with this, because I went to the Killian Hayes Revenge Tour a couple weeks ago with Easy, which was a whole lot of fun. Shout out to Easy. Yeah. So we're sitting in like, shout out to Heavyweights, or X Support Group, or whatever they were called for a little bit.
Yeah.
So we're going there, and I'm not even exaggerating. We had to wait a good like 35 minutes to get into the door. It's the Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah.
It's not a good basketball team.
Yep.
I think a lot of people after the Lions didn't do as well as they thought they were going to do, And the Red Wings obviously fired their new coach. They go on a little winning streak, then they went on a 7-game losing streak, getting back in the win column, kind of playing like 500 hockey as of late. I think a lot of casual Detroit sports fans see what the Pistons are doing, seeing them actually, be in playoff seeding. Like the Red Wings right now are, chasing a wild card. Like the season end of the day, they wouldn't make the playoffs again, and they've been rebuilding for like, I don't know, 10 years. I think what you're seeing is a lot of fans are buying into what JB told us this past summer of when you turn on the TV, you'll see Detroit Pistons basketball, and they remind me a lot of the early going to work Pistons, like early 2002. And then they popped off and they won 50 games the next season. Like there's so many similarities with this team, and the similarities are the togetherness, the way that they fight for each other. JB, I think, is probably the most passionate coach that we've had since, you could put SVG in that category, Larry Brown, Flip Saunders. Like the way he is on these refs' ass, I just saw a stat. I looked it up, actually. He leads the league in technical fouls among coaches. He's got 13 techs this year, which kind of tells you how much he's on the refs' ass. I think the reason why this feels different from the KCP, Andre Drummond-led teams to the Blake Griffin-led teams is I think there's a belief among the fan base of this isn't going just to be a one-year thing.
Yep.
Like, I think this has sustainability where this team is going to be in the conversation in the Eastern Conference playoffs. And you kind of look at the core that they have, like, no one's really, like their young core, no one's over like 26 years old. Yeah, your franchise guy is like, what, 23 years old? Jaden Ivey, I think, is 21, 22. JD still 21. Like, there's a lot to like with this core. And I think just this year, like, I think they've shattered a lot of fans' expectations because, going from a 14-win season to, I think, what are they at, like 37 wins right now? That's a huge improvement. And I think, to answer your question, Kaneda, the fact that a lot of these games, the remaining home season games, per George Blaha on the broadcast, he said they're sold out. And you go on like a third-party ticket app, like a Game Time or a Ticketmaster, those are sold out prices. Like it was $125 for a bleeder seat for OKC.
Sheesh.
Yeah. Like tickets are expensive. I think the fans are into it. The city's into it. And I've always said, like, this city has been starving for a good basketball team for a long time. The last time that they won a playoff series I was a freshman in high school, and that was quite a long time ago. Like, I just turned 33 a couple weeks ago. So, this team feels different. It feels like they can actually build on something, add some more veteran pieces, add secondary scoring, maybe add more of a toolsy like wing defender to help out on the perimeter. Like, I don't really think you could cap this team's potential in terms of where they can go. And I'm under the mindset of let this core grow and see how far JB can take them.
Agreed. I'm really excited to see just how far they can go, especially this playoffs and just moving forward as well. Like it's rare that you can have a rebuild that has been as tumultuous as this one really truly pay off, right? Like, because obviously no rebuild is perfect, and honestly most rebuilds are ugly. But the fact that they were able to get this to where it has been, and where it probably will be going, is insane. And I think the one thing that that differentiates it between the Lions, because the Lions obviously are championship contenders pretty much perennially now, but in terms of just buy-in and things that, in terms of like an entertainment standpoint, just on like a emotional standpoint that fans can really cling to, is basketball is a personality sport, right? Like the guys don't wear helmets the players' names, and the star players are truly star players, right? Cade Cunningham is a star. The fact that this arena yesterday got as amped up as they did for a Cade Cunningham technical foul ejection, where they were just, and because my brother went to the game, and I just was hearing like how insane the arena got when he got ejected, that like, got to the point where JB was like, going to the crowd and amping him up. Like, this team is one that the city's obviously bought into, but their franchise player is someone that not only are they bought into, like they're willing to like, die for, pretty much. Like, this is a city that like does not let anybody talk about Cade Cunningham. Will always ride for Cade Cunningham, and like you've seen it, you've seen the semblances of it since he got drafted, like when he put the buffs on, like that was a huge moment, and it felt like it was just like a matter of time before we really reached this point where Cade was Detroit's guy, and it really feels like he has become Detroit's guy. Like, the Jared Goff chants have died, and the MVP chants have been born. I really feel like, in terms of superstardom, obviously he's going to be, I think, a national superstar, but I think it's so much more important to the community and the city, and just the fan base as a whole, like worldwide, because, the Pistons fan base is insane, like the shout out to Tom in Korea, right? Like they got people everywhere, but this is a fan base that's truly bought into their guy. And the shout out to the comment where, in Tigers games, before they ever drafted Cade, they were chanting, "We want Cade." Like, this has been a love story that has gone on for half a decade, that they wanted him before they could ever draft him, and it got to the point where, like, I remember fans were like, "Oh man, I don't even know if we're gonna get the chance to draft Cade. Like, what are we gonna do if we can't draft Cade?" And then they drafted him, and then it's been everything since then. And now to really have this euphoric season where Cade becomes an all-star, you're making the playoffs, it really feels like the culmination of something great, and it feels like Detroit's really found their guy, which is really sweet.
It is. It honestly, like, I know we had so many conversations this summer because we were reacting to, like, I remember doing the ESPN list with you, and it was 67. And you went on like a 15-minute rant of like how disrespected he is. And I told you, I said, if he wins a little bit, I think he's going to be in those same kind of conversations that Paolo was in last year. Anthony Edwards. Like, I just saw Bill Simmons the other day. He had Anthony Edwards off his second team All-NBA and had Cade in there. Like, think about that for a minute. Like, Anthony Edwards, I think we can all agree, is like probably one of the most entertaining players on and off the court. And you have big national guys like a Bill Simmons and a Ryan Russillo saying, like, yeah, Cade's probably second team All-NBA. Like, no one was thinking that coming into the season. They were like, maybe he could be an all-star. Maybe they can get the 30 wins. Now, like, I've seen the expectations from fans change with the Wizards game. I've never seen fans that upset in my life, and deservedly so. Like, that tells you how locked in this city is right now, and they're looking at the playoff seeding. They're looking, where they could possibly get a first-round matchup. Like, I haven't seen the city this locked in probably since I was a kid.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Like, in my lifetime, this is a first, right? Like, I always talked about when I was first, like, in high school and everything like that, like middle school, nobody was a Pistons fan. Like, nobody my age, I'm 22, nobody my age was a Pistons fan. Like, you would get made fun of if you were a Pistons fan. And like that 2019 season where they made the playoffs, like I remember, and I was a junior in high school that year. I was getting cooked. I was like, yeah, they can win a game. Like, they can win a series. No, they're not. Like, they suck. Everybody was Thunder fans. Everybody was Warriors fans, Cavs fans, Lakers fans. To now have this be a team that the city, not only the city, but generally the state, the fan base as a whole worldwide, like, this is a team that gets rallied around is really incredible, and it's really exciting to see. And I hope they can carry the momentum into the playoffs and really have something special happen.
I do too, because I think this is just the beginning of something that's going to just explode. And I think they'll probably have like guys like Vinny Goodwill saying like, "Oh, what happened to the 2024, 25 Pistons to the possibly 2027, 2028 NBA champs?" Like how did it like just go that fast? And they're in those conversations, which I'm making a prediction. I think they will be in the finals by then, 2027, 2028.
I mean, I would love to cover an NBA final, so I sure hope so. That would be sweet, and I think the city would explode. Literally, I think that there would, if this team, went from with the same core, from 28 game losing streak, embarrassment of a season, to championship within the same decade. That's a 30 for 30, like off rip. That's a story that needs to be told. Hopefully I can tell it. Because it's been in like my first season covering this team was last year, where I was in the throes of the Wingstons, the losing, the chaos, the never ending roster changes, the fans, basically rioting, like from that to this in 1 year is ridiculous. And, it's incredible.
It's funny. Like, I think it was your first season last year. My buddy Sean Murphy, it was his first season last year, covering the Pistons, and Eric Vincent as well, which all three of you first year, like let's cover a 28 game losing streak. Let's go, boys. Like,
it was hard to get people to care, man.
I know.
It was a tough fight.
I mean, it still doesn't even feel real. Like, I literally had someone tell me that they live in like the San Antonio area, and they went to go see how Monty did coaching a private, I believe, Christian league where his son plays with like Tim Duncan's son and Bruce Bowen's son.
Oh, wow.
And he's like, dude, like they're terrible. Like they're like an average team and they have good players. Like I don't understand why he's still coaching. Like I was like, I don't know, man. Like just kind of like let him live. Like I thought some fans were like, yeah, let's go to Texas and go boo him. I was like, good lord.
That's a level of hate I respect, but Fifth Amendment on that one.
Yeah, same here. Like I would not do that. I mean, like I covered his son when he was at Brother Rice. I thought he was really good. He'll probably be a lottery pick in a few years because he's just really talented. But some fans are just wild. I'm sure you've seen it. Like I've never seen such a sensitive fan base like the OKC Thunder, because I thought it was about them yesterday, and it completely wasn't about them. They tried to make it about them. I was like, my beef isn't with you, it's with Brian Forte. Like, chill out.
Yeah, I saw some of that. It's interesting. Like, it's also just like it feeds into the national discourse from the year, where a lot of fans kind of call Shea like a foul baiter and stuff like that. So like, it doesn't help when Twitter is misinformation central, and like the biggest tweets every night come from like Hater Report and NBA Centel, where like, obviously they're just doing it to do it, but then it starts getting to a point now where it's like, okay, like we have to make sure that we're actually letting people know the real information as well, because people genuinely thought JB Bickerstaff was upset with Shea and not with the officiating, which was I can't even blame people for it, but like we got to do a little bit more research. Like I know that like, information's never been harder to really get on a wide scale, but like, come on guys, like if you just watch the clip, even, you know what I mean? Like it's pretty obvious that it's about the officiating, but
Yeah. I mean, I saw Hater Report left the comment, said it has nothing to do with SGA. It has to do with Brian Forte and the officiating crew. Like the whole 3 or 5 technicals in a quarter is just, I don't even know, man. Like I could tell the game was going to get dicey when he told the Thunder, stop yelling at me. I was like, yeah, he lost control. There something's going to happen and it's not going to end well. But I appreciate you coming on as always, man.
Of
I
course.
always enjoy talking to you. People love you, like I always tell you. But I want to give you the floor to plug and promote yourself, bully ball, or whatever you're working on currently.
Yeah, first of all, I appreciate you having me on as always. Really enjoy coming on here. Yeah, as always, it's at Zarek Xavier on everything. My photography, it's easiest to find when you go to my Instagram, which is same handle, Zarek Xavier, and I also do collab posts with Bully Ball as well. So if you could just go, it's at Real Bully Ball as well. It's also there. That's primarily been my form of storytelling this year, has been with the visuals. I really want to do some profiles. I know I'll have one coming soon on the G League level, which I know some people already have their reservations about, but it's a great story. The Pistons / Crews have a player who started this year as a tryout, and he is a huge player for them. He played, I think, 32 minutes tonight. He was in the G League Rise, the Next Up game. Really incredible story. So I'm working on that currently, and hopefully I can get some Pistons stuff in there as well on the writing front. But yeah, I appreciate you having me on, and as always, man, it's good to be on here.
Yeah, I saw that picture of Malik that blew the hell up. Like, and I saw it, and I was just like, I thought it was actually you that posted it. I had no idea I was actually commenting on Malik's IG. And I was like, yeah, so Malik should frame this. And then he liked it. I was like, oh shit, my bad. My bad, Malik.
Yeah. It was honestly like, I'll be completely transparent. Like I've been doing the photography now for like 4 seasons, if you include the cruise. And I think the first couple seasons I was really just kind of figuring it out, like how I want to go about things. But I think in like this season, I've really kind of hit my groove when it comes to how I approach taking the pictures and stuff like that. So getting love from the players, not just Malik, like Stu, Malik, Bobby, even like, I get Duran as well, liked and shared just in the last week alone. Like it's really cool. And it feels good just to know that, my work is appreciated, because it's a lot. It's a lot of work editing all these pictures and going from Lansing to Detroit, and still being in school. Because I do Big Ten stuff for my class, so it's been insane. But it feels good to get a little bit of recognition here and there. And I truly do feel like that picture, I was like, this might be my Mona Lisa. And it wasn't even one, ironically, that like when I got it, I was just so nervous, because a lot of times I'm like, fuck, I hope it's in focus, right? Like I really hope it's in focus, because ironically, Malik's shimmy has been the thing I have struggled with getting focus on the most by far this season. Like every time he's done it, it's out of focus and I get pissed. I'm like, God damn it. Like that would be such a good picture. And the fact that like, that happened where I finally got it, and I got him celebrating with the crowd, and I got it to turn out as well as it did when it did. Felt like perfect timing. And one of his friends, I'll shout him out here, Brian Chow, is also a photographer. He was the one that reached out to me when I had posted it on Twitter and was like, hey, how can I get this to Malik? And that turned into its own thing. He does great work as well. He does a lot of freelance stuff, and he does a lot of posts with League Fits. So shout out to Brian. But yeah, it's been cool, man. I just hope I get to keep going, and yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, like I saw that picture. I was like, man, I would blow that up and just like frame it if I was him. Because it's like that. I think that was the Boston game, if I do remember correctly, and that was like a really big 3 that he hit.
I think it was not the, what was the game before? It was the Clippers. I think it was the Clippers game, actually.
Oh, okay.
It was the Clippers game. And ironically, that was a game where I felt like it was a really slow, kind of ugly basketball game, and sometimes those don't necessarily yield for the best pictures. Shout out Zayon. Those don't yield for the best pictures. So I was like, fuck, like I don't know, because sometimes when you shoot, you don't know what you really got. And when I went to edit it, I was like, oh, I got actually some good shit here, and especially that one, just the amount of life happening. Like that's also an underrated part about like the sellout crowds, is like it adds so much atmosphere for me. As a photographer, like to capture everything happening, because you'll take a picture of what's happening on the court, but because of where I'm placed is like usually within the crowd, and then if it's not, it's at the bottom of the PR stairs, which is still near the crowd. Like it adds so much to the atmosphere, and I'm so excited to, if I can, I'm so excited to take some pictures of a playoff game.
Yeah, that'll be nuts and wild. But I just saw it and I was like, yo, like there was that picture and then the LeBron and Cade one you had this year. I was like, dog, like SAR's in his bag. Like that was an amazing picture.
Appreciate
like,
that. Yeah. I've had to get in my Duffy a few times this year.
But we're gonna wrap this podcast up, you guys. It should be up on all the audio platforms probably later tonight. But if you guys are still watching, got about almost 440 of you in here. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe button, all that good stuff. But until next time, peace.